A few years ago, I used to dread taking down notes. Every time a teacher would put something on the board, it was always a constant race, a Formula One race, for me to take down the notes, put it into my note diary, and to keep it in there. And what was the result? Hundreds of notes, even thousands of notes that I now never use again. And even the day afterwards, I couldn't even read what I wrote. And that system continued into secondary school and even into college. But then I discovered a new form of note-taking, Zettelkasten. And I was amazed by it because of its ability to make note-taking actually fun. So that's what we're going to discuss today, how you can actually make note-taking fun and a better form to take notes. It took a leap of faith for me to start this form of note-taking, but once I did, I never looked back again. So firstly, what is Zettelkasten? Well, most notes-taking techniques follow a top-down approach. Let's say a teacher puts down a topic called cognitive biases, and you, the student, would usually take down the notes that are confined within that category. But here's the problem with that form of note-taking. It forces you to be inside the box, to think inside the box. But as we know, in order for us to find unique ideas, we need to connect them together. We need to connect different ideas together. But if you take down notes in a confined box, confined categories, then how are you going to find new ideas? It's going to be hard for you to find links between different ideas. And we also know that a great form of learning, a great form to actually learn new things, is by elaboration, by elaborating on a specific topic that you've learned, even finding connections between different ideas and different topics. But if you automatically confine your idea to just one category, one box, it's going to be very hard for you to even elaborate on that. So that's why we need to use a different form of note-taking, Zettelkasten, to actually elaborate further on our ideas and actually learn much more effectively. So what does Zettelkasten do differently than the traditional form of note-taking that just forces you to be inside the box? Well, Zettelkasten allows your notes to be loose. It doesn't have confined categories. It has ideas that you can write about, and then you can link them with different topics and ideas. So instead of closing your notes to confined boundaries, Zettelkasten doesn't have that. It has links to different ideas, different notes that you've taken, so that you can find the intersection, the ideas that intersect between both notes. So why does Zettelkasten actually work? Well, Zettelkasten works because, like I said, elaboration is actually one of the best forms of learning, of how you can actually retain information. When you elaborate and expand on what you've already learned and find different ideas and different links to that idea becomes much more solidified in your brain, in your mind. And also, you're not copying other people's notes, because this is a common thing in traditional note-taking. We just copy what the teacher writes down on the board. But in reality, those notes are not your notes. You haven't formed the connection in your brain to come to that conclusion. The teacher has. That's why it's easy for them. But you haven't come to that conclusion yet. So that's why it's important that you have general ideas first, by using a Zettelkasten method, expanding on those ideas, and also finding links between different ideas and different topics. So where would you even gather this form of information? Where would you even gather this information from? Well, firstly, one of the best ways to just gather this information is by simply books. Be a curious person, read about lots of things. If you're into psychology, read about psychology. If you're into science, read about science. If you're into neuroscience, read about neuroscience. And what you begin to realize when you start using the Zettelkasten method, when you begin to stop categorizing your notes and you actually ask yourself, what does this note link to? Then you'll begin to find even connections between seemingly unrelated ideas, such as cognitive bias and neuroscience. You actually begin to realize that they're actually a whole lot more similar than you think they are. So how do you do this right now? Well, I use a note-taking app called Obsidian, and it has a very cool feature where you can link different ideas together. So I would recommend using Obsidian for this. But let's just say you aren't using Obsidian or you're just using a regular note-taking app. What I would recommend is, instead of categorizing your notes immediately, write down an idea that comes to mind when you are researching about a specific topic. And then once you've done that, ask yourself, what does this idea link to? Does this link to psychology? Does cognitive biases link to neuroscience? Does it link to decision making? When you start to do that, you begin to realize that, okay, cognitive biases actually have an impact on our decision making, and then that's a new idea altogether. And when you do this is going to be very good for essay writing or even research papers that you'll begin to do. What happens when you use this form of note taking consistently? Well, you'll begin to realize that a lot of things in life, pretty much everything in life, is interconnected. The way that we learn in isolated fragments is not how learning works. A lot of our ideas are interconnected, and that's how you'll be able to create new ideas, expand different fields, and even be more curious and learn more things about things that you are more interested about. So, the best way to start is simple. If you're watching a video on a specific topic, if you're reading about a specific topic, write down things that come to mind. Write down a quick essay, a quick form, write down quick notes, bullet points, whatever it may be, and ask yourself, what does this idea that I'm writing about link to? Does this link to different ideas that I've researched about in the past? Perhaps it links to psychology, neuroscience, whatever it may be, fitness. Link those ideas together, and then you'll begin to realize that those ideas, those different topics that you've just written about, are connected, and from there you can expand your learning and become a master in your field.